program.
This conference will now be recorded.
Could I just make just a quick announcement? We are recording the event.
Thank you all for joining us here today. I see that we have 110 participants on the call, and I think that is really an indicator of the need for this type of program. And the genesis of this was a conversation probably about a month and a half ago between a number of different local entities who were all concerned about what we at that point were calling the avalanche or the snowball effect. What is going to happen when the eviction moratoria are lifted? So that was the idea behind bringing folks together today. I'll introduce myself and just say a few more words about why we felt this call was needed. My name is Leela Powell. I'm the Executive Director of the Local Initiatives Support Corporation's office in San Antonio, and I have a background in affordable housing lending and public policy and advocacy, as well as having the honor this year to serve as the president of Sarah's board of directors. So of the CFC, the president of the CFC board. The concern that we were having, and it's really actually an opportunity, is that we didn't have a platform for all of the hundreds of individuals and dozens of agencies who are trying to address the coming crisis. And I think a lot of folks on this call would share the awareness that while we have had a very difficult, intensely difficult last 8 to 9 months, that we do not think we are through the storm. In fact, we think the worst may be coming when whatever action is taken with moratoria in 2021 arrives. And the intent was to introduce all of the players, or as many of the players as possible in this field, to each other, to share what we're working on so that folks know that they're not alone, that they can have contacts with other groups out there, and possibly, if practical, to create the foundation for an ongoing forum and community of practice that will allow us to collaborate together more effectively. So that's all I'm going to say about the why for today. I want to go ahead and turn this over with many thanks to Asa Kamal at Sarah, who has done the backbone work in organizing today's event, and who will kick us off with the speaker introduction.
Thank you so much, Leila. All I did is just send the emails, by the way. It wouldn't have happened at all without the support from Sarah to push for this, but also from the 12 people, I'm sorry, minus myself, 12 people who committed, who just responded to my last minute call. So thank you so much for everyone, and for everyone who sent me resources working until Friday after hours. So I'm just going to ask every speaker to introduce himself or herself. And thanks, Leila. I think you introduced yourself. So I'm just going to go ahead, just for the sake of time, to the next speaker. And we're going to spend 10 minutes, just a brief intro, name and organization, and your role in the organization. So we're going to go with Lori Hall from LISC.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay, Aza?
Yes, I do.
Very good. Okay, I'm Lori Hall, Program Officer with the Local Initiative Support Corporation San Antonio office. Leila and I work together, and I also have a role on a group in the state called the Texas Housing Stability Collaborative. Locally, as a program officer, I work with nonprofits to build their technical assistance, and we dole out some funds for that purpose as well. We have done some things locally this past year and a half, such as hold steady groups for housing counselors and service providers interested in getting their HUD certification. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Along with the Texas Housing Stability Collaborative, that was a group that started meeting in the state. These were all people that were previously involved during the foreclosure crisis between 2008 and 2013. This is a group of people that represent everything from TSHAC, David Long there, to Matt Hull in the state, to locally major cities in Texas that have major housing counseling agencies are on it. At that time, there were mortgage companies, the Federal Reserve, groups such as major internet intermediaries such as NeighborWorks and others. So many of you probably remember that 2008 to 2013 period. That was home foreclosures. Now we're dealing with something really different. We're dealing with home foreclosures and rental evictions. And it's a little different set of circumstances. So that Texas Housing Stability Collaborative kind of grew. Everybody started calling each other from that previous group and saying, I think we're headed in that direction again, and we need to get ready. And so they all started meeting, and I happened to be talking to several of them about that and what was going on in San Antonio. And so the Texas Housing Stability Collaborative is kind of the 2.0 version of what occurred previously. And so just to inform all of you on what that is, it's a new and kind of fast-growing network of individuals and organizations working to avert home foreclosures and rental evictions and minimize the economic and financial impact in Texas on families and communities. And our mission is to connect struggling homeowners and renters with free HUD-approved housing counseling services while supporting and strengthening Texas HUD-approved housing counseling agencies with capacity building resources needed to meet the increasing need for the mortgage and rental counseling assistance. So here's what we know, that there's an increased need in Texas for housing counseling services, and agencies are adapting to provide counseling services during COVID-19, and those adaptation techniques have been very successful, especially among the nonprofits. Where have counselors seen an increase in need? Definitely foreclosure and mortgages, that's up about 54%. Financial assistance to renters is up about 75%, and lease negotiation and retention is up about 41%. And let me grab some notes here. 75% of the agencies, the housing counseling agencies in Texas, lack financial ability to increase their staff, but they're all experiencing increased need right now, right? So that's causing some problems. 45% of agencies lack the resources to train their new and current staff. So there's a couple of things going on in the housing counseling agency. HUD, over a year ago, said all housing counselors have to be certified and take a test. And so that has been going on in the last year. Due to COVID, it was increased until next August 2021. So we've had, what I noticed locally is we had the normal suspects of housing counselors who are studying and getting their certification, but there were a number of service providers that were coming to the table, and they were coming to the table because there's a lack of affordable housing out there, right? And so they are starting to get inundated with housing type questions. And so when we put out there that we were doing kind of a 15-week course on housing, getting housing certification and counseling, a lot of them jumped on board just because they wanted the information. And they're the service providers are the ones that are getting all the calls from I think it's 511, the United Way number, and they're the ones that are trying to help all those people burning up that line. And so that's how this Texas Housing Stability Collaborative started coming back together, is how can we amass resources as a state organization to dole out or get funds to or resources to major organizations that are doing and providing these kind of housing counseling services, either foreclosure prevention or rental housing eviction prevention. So many of you, of course, are aware of all the efforts going on here in San Antonio. And so that's what I've been reporting on to the State Housing Organization as what the types of efforts that are going on here. There's tremendous efforts going on in the homeless realm as well. And so that's one issue that the Texas Housing Collaborative has not gotten into, is the homeless issue. That's its own animal. It's big, it's huge, it's complicated. So the collaborative has not gone in that direction. But there are and will be meetings of the Texas Housing Collaborative. They'll be chopped up into different committees, legislative, resource building, etc. So those interested in wanting to listen to those meetings and join those meetings, let us know, and we'll get that information out to you so that you can participate in that event. So I think that's it for me.
Well, thank you, Lori. Thank you very much. I think we're going to go ahead with just like a quick tour around the speaker's intro in just a moment. Say your name, please, and your affiliation. Then we're going to go back to the presentation. Just we want to follow a little bit of the agenda so people don't get confused. So I'm just keeping myself. I'm going to be at the end. So Katie, you're next.
Sure. So just quickly, I'm Katie Bella. I'm the Executive Director of SARA, the South Alamo Regional Alliance for the Homeless. And our mission is to make sure everyone has a safe place to call home, but we don't provide direct service. What we do is work on coordinating the system of care, focusing on measurable outcomes with our stakeholders, and just looking at how we can create collaboration and programs across sectors for lasting and sustainable change. So thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Katie. Patrick?
Hi, everyone. This is Patrick Steck. I'm the Interim Assistant Director for the City of San Antonio's Department of Human Services. For DHS, I oversee our homeless programs as well as our Family Assistance Division, which includes financial counseling, utility bill assistance, VITA tax preparation, and a job trainings program. In addition, our department runs senior centers, childcare, subsidy, the contracts with nonprofits that the city has, as well as the Head Start program for San Antonio and Edgewood ISD. So thank you all for the opportunity.
I'll go next here. My name is Sarah Wumsley. I'm the Interim Affordable Housing Administrator with the Neighborhood and Housing Services Department in the City of San Antonio. Our department traditionally is really focused on the preservation and development of affordable housing, and less focused on the payment of rent to people within the units, for instance. But that's really changed, especially in light of everything that's happened in this past year. And so lately we've been administering our Emergency Housing Assistance Program and a few other interventions that I look forward to sharing more with you. Thanks.
I'll go next. Thanks, Sarah. I'm Tyler Smith with Wells Fargo. I lead the community relations team for Texas and 7 other bordering states. So I've got team members that are responsible for maintaining Wells Fargo's reputation, working in the community. We also do local philanthropy. Our focus is on affordable housing, on small business, financial health, and on sustainability. So I've got team members that are already very actively engaged in the work that TSHAC and other housing collaboratives are doing. Before taking this role in public relations, I led Wells Fargo's REO team through the foreclosure crisis. So the last 12 years, I was on the mortgage side working in default servicing. So hopefully I can bring some of that perspective to the conversation today.
Sorry, I'm Mark Ross with Bob Ross Realty. I have been president of the local, state, and the 2016 chairman of the board of the National Apartment Association. I have been dealing from the other end of this with, from the landlord perspective on how to deal with COVID and how to keep people in place. And probably one of my most proudest accomplishments or contributions was to be helping to get the risk mitigation fund both off the ground originally and then to see it come to fruition during this pandemic, meeting probably 200 hours with the city and the city staff to work it to make it workable. And then I'll be have some comments later when we go over our presentations.
Good morning, Brandy Bettis with the San Antonio Housing Authority. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the agency. We have two large federal programs, one being public housing, where we are the landlords, and then our other program is the Housing Choice Voucher, most commonly known as the Section 8 program. And so we'll discuss some of the initiatives that SAHA has brought to the table during this time. Thank you.
Good morning, this is Tammy Trevino. I'm the Executive Director for the Housing Authority of Bexar County. We also have the Housing Choice Voucher Program that we administer in the Bexar County area. And we have low-income housing tax credit projects that actually belong to us. We own about, while we oversee a couple of thousand, we actually own about 500 of our own. So we can talk a little bit more about that as we move on.
Good morning. My name is Laura Montañez, and I am filling in for Robert Reyna, our Community Development Manager for Bexar County. I am the Community Development Specialist for the Bexar County Economic and Community Development Division. Our division oversees 3 federal grants administered by HUD, so that would be the CDBG, ESG, and home grants. And our initiatives are to increase our affordable housing supply and also to maintain the existing supply that we have, but also undertake economic and development projects in the community for the Bexar County residents.
Thank you, Laura, for filling in. Thank you very much. Ann? I think she's still having an issue with her internet today. She emailed her this morning. She might be able to join at any minute. So we're gonna go with Raymond Herrera.
Dr. Kamal, thank you. My name is Raymond Herrera. I'm the local contact agent with ACOG. I work with transitioning individuals back into the community. I have been working diligently in developing referral sources as I am tied to the Alamo Service Connection. We are a referral program that assists individuals here in Bexar County as well as the Alamo counties in providing those appropriate services that are needed depending on, I guess, what's going on out there today. Right now with the moratorium, looking at possibly ending very soon, that's been my focus, is just pulling together as much as I can to use as a referral source for individuals who be calling in and seeking assistance.
Thank you very much. And me, Azza Kamal, I'm Director of Research and Evaluation at South Alamo Regional Alliance for the Homeless, and previously worked on some of the emergency housing assistance program with the city of San Antonio. And I care a lot about evidence-based research, the direct decision making, and that's my whole past 15 years, and I'm enjoying a lot working on a lot of federal but community reports, particularly addressing eviction and the pathway to homelessness in order to cut this loop in early before at the time people at risk. So we're gonna go next to the next item in the agenda, where speakers gonna talk for 5 minutes, and I really appreciate that. This is the last call for a very short presentation, so it's not easy. So I really, really appreciate for those of you who agreed to present. And I'm just gonna ask the participants, if you have any questions, we left time for Q&A at the end. Please type your question at the chat, and my colleague here, Madeline, will be facilitating the questions, and we'll read the questions and direct them to the person in order. I'll help out with that, but she will help also unmute, because we, just for that number, we have to unmute everyone. We apologize in advance, but just let's be efficient in our timing. So thank you, and Leila will take it from here.
So I'm going to turn my time back to Lori, who will be able to go over some of the material that she has about the state level program. But I do want to encourage folks to put questions in the chat, even if we are running short of time, because LISC would very much like to extend on this discussion through future programming that responds to the needs of the people on the call. In other words, if you think that there are topics that are not being adequately covered, or you would like to have a forum to explore some of these issues, LISC would be happy in partnership with Sarah, who also is bringing this call forward today, to make those conversations happen more easily. So I'll cede the rest of my time and allow Lori to go ahead and speak, but please do put questions in the chat, and if they don't get answered today, we will be able to schedule future events where we can continue to explore these topics. I also want to recognize Katie Vella, the new executive director of SARA. She just came on board last month, and I think her leadership is going to take us more in a direction of doing a lot of collaborative work like this, which is very exciting for the community.
Okay, thanks, Leila. It's Lori Hall again. I kind of gave my 5 minutes up front in the intro, so I apologize for that. And let me just add at this point, for the Texas Housing Collaboratives, Texas Housing Stability Collaborative, that there are two things going on. One, an effort to raise resources to distribute out to major organizations in Texas who will need to provide counseling for those that are facing foreclosure and home foreclosure and rental eviction. And then secondly, I'd like to just note that locally, the kind of information that we are feeding the Texas Housing Stability Collaborative are things such as the month of January and the expectations of what may happen then. Fortunately, some moratoriums on foreclosures and rental evictions have been extended, but those vary and it's a little complicated. But we're all very concerned about January 2021, when the courthouse steps may open up again. We're still learning what the county's going to do, but there's a lot of home foreclosures that have been staved off until the moratorium lifts. So when that moratorium lifts, there's a lot of big concerns about what is going to happen in the number of people that may be facing the eviction process. Due to the 30, 90, 120-day letter process, again, we're all looking at either January or February for a lot of those home foreclosures to hit. And we'll see the real impact when we see the number of houses that go up for foreclosure on the courthouse steps. So that's a big thing to watch. Kudos to Sarah Walmsley and her team at the city's housing office, NHSD, neighborhood housing office, and the work that they're doing in the court systems to stave off rental evictions and the mediation that's going on there between landlords and renters. We're again reporting that up to the state, and with the purpose of letting the state know what's happening in Bexar County and the San Antonio area, so that we can get access to those resources when the time comes and get those coming back to organizations who are going to need it. So obviously what we're hearing is there's a lot of housing counseling or organizations, service providing organizations that need help and need they've been inundated by need, but they don't necessarily have the dollars to grow or the staff to grow with that need. So that's where you need to be vocal. Your organization needs to be vocal about what's happening in your neck of the woods and make sure that's getting out there. Okay. Leila, you can turn it over to the next speaker.
I think that's me. Thank you very much, Lori. This is really great to hear. And just a quick announcement if you're going to be like me presenting some material because we didn't ask you to send them to us because it's a short notice, please just let us know, put in the chat that you need to be a presenter. So Madeline will give you access to present. So Madeline, if you don't mind, I'd like to present me and Katie a couple of slides. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, let me try to put it in the presentation mode if that worked. Just to save time, I'm just gonna go ahead and keep manipulating the size as we go. So the reason I'm starting first is just I wanna address some of the snapshots of facts we learn about the status of eviction and moving and the pathway to homelessness in Texas, but nationally during particularly the pandemic. So we learned that during the pandemic, there have been through the study of on mymove.com that 15.9 million people filed for change of address requests, and 4% were increased in total movers from same time last year. Out of those, 2% permanent movers and 27% were temporary mover. These are people who moved because of the school housing, they couldn't pay for housing, or they were laid off and they have to move. And some people just consolidated their residences with their parents or extended families. So a majority were because of financial causes. We also know, and if you looked at the red bars here in this graph, the highly dense areas have lost people. People moved out. New York were at the top on the list, followed by one of its boroughs where the majority live and work in Manhattan, so that's Brooklyn, and then followed by Chicago. And we know also that 6 of the top 10 small towns and cities that have increased people moving in, 6 out of those 10 were in Texas, starting by Katy and Richmond, Fresno, and the list goes on and on. And this increase actually in some areas like Katy exceeds 25% increase of people moving in at the same time compared to the same time last year. So we also learn that homelessness is a dynamic world where people move between the continuum of care and the geography that's covered by each continuum of care. So having 6 cities close to San Antonio and Bexar County continuum of care is a red flag for us. And we're gonna go next to some of the data we learned in the past 2 months from reports. With a study just recently published a couple of weeks ago from National Low Income Housing Coalition and the University of Arizona Innovation for Justice, we learned that as of September, there was an estimate by the global consulting firm Stout Research Ross, that between 9.5 million and 13.9 million nationally of the renter household may be at risk of eviction. And looking at the graph here, there was a breakdown by the people at risk of eviction, the people method of paying for rent, and their level of confidence of paying for rent. And if you can see here, the people with no confidence, they paid mostly for rent out of borrowing to the gray bar, and people followed by 35% of them who took from their savings or put on the credit card. So all of which are very alarming, and that level of the distribution of source of spending get a little bit skewed as the level of confidence increased. And as you can see, if they are more confident, they will pay out of their regular income. This is all a red flag. This is pretty recent data. And we also learned that these numbers, what you see here in the graph, are actually from October 14th to October 26th. The US Census is looking on a weekly basis, and this data is 2 weeks combined. So they're looking at on a weekly basis of what they call household pulse survey about how people pay for their rent, because according to Stout, global consulting firm, that 1/3 of the people who have no confidence and 75% of a slight confidence will likely be able to pay, but the rest will not. So meaning that you have 64% of the first category, the people with no confidence, will not be able to pay for rent next month. This is why it's very, very important to track the census data and to look at where we are in Texas and in San Antonio. Then there is additional, if that's going to happen, there's a pathway between eviction and not being able to pay for rent as a cause for eviction, which is a pathway to homelessness. In Houston, for example, 55% of people who have eviction filed were actually homeless or have eviction being approved in the court and they lost their property. And the cost ranges in 3 scenarios done by the Federal Reserve and between Stout low and high estimate. These scenarios are projection. Scenario 1 and 2 and 3, they have an estimate between $5 trillion to over $13 trillion as the cost of major supportive service, medical costs, and services that provided by homeless providers. This is the cost of homelessness in Texas as a result of potential eviction. This is so far the estimate. We don't know if the moratorium increase, what's going to be looking like these numbers, likely to skyrocket, unfortunately. We also learned that there is a huge disparity when it comes to prevention and why we do prevention, and there's a persistent disparity as data become available and we learn more. But also in terms of how we incorporate equity. The gender disparity is clear. Twice the applicant for Emergency Housing Assistance Program for the city, twice were women were twice the men, and people with high school or less were 3 times the people with bachelor or graduate degree, and people with less than 30% area median income were 5 times that the people at the median income or between 80 and 100 area median income. Geography matters also, and our concentration in some zip codes, and race is matters. Black or African American were twice as any other race to apply. With that, I'm ending. This is a huge and consistent red flags for us, and we continue to monitor this data. So I'm leaving the mic here to Katie to talk to us about Sarah's program.
Thank you so much. And so we wanted to start with, why this is important. And we all know there's a pending potential crisis, but it's helpful to really look at the trends for people who have applied over the last few months and try to predict what will happen. So I just quickly wanted to talk about what Sarah's role is if you haven't worked as closely with us in the past. So if you can go to the next slide. So one of our key roles for the community to be aware of is in coordinating funding. So as your continuum of care lead agency, we apply for federal funding on your behalf. So in a typical year, we'll coordinate about $10 million in continuum of care funding through a local competition. We also now have a grant called the Youth Homeless Demonstration Program grant for $6.88 million over 2 years. This is exclusively for youth and young adults under the age of 25. And in past years, we've coordinated emergency solutions grant funding for the state. New this year has been 2 rounds of CARES Act funding through TDHCA, which is the state. The first round was $1.2 million and the second was $3.8 million. This includes funding exclusively for prevention for people who are filing for eviction. And we also coordinate closely with the city of San Antonio and Bexar County, who have their own pockets of CARES Act funding, to make sure that we're all aligned and where it's distributed, what the priorities are, And so looking ahead to 2021, if there are future rounds of funding in homelessness or prevention, you can look for funding competitions on the SARA website, Facebook page. We'll get the word out to as many partners as possible. And then if you can go to the final slide. Just to tell you a little bit about our work that ties into preventing homelessness. So one is our PLACE program, which is a partnership with the neighborhood and housing department at the city. We have $150,000 in risk mitigation funds. So if you have a high risk tenant, someone with a lot of barriers to housing, this is an incentive fund for landlords so that if there are any damages to the apartment unit while they're living there, or if they vacate the apartment, the fund will cover that loss for the landlord. So far, after a year of operating, we've only had to pay out funds once. So I think that's just a testament to how well our renters do because of the supportive services they have in housing. But if you're interested in learning more, I'll share our Contact Sarah email at the end of the presentation. We also are very grateful for a partnership with the San Antonio Housing Authority for vouchers. We coordinate these programs with service provider agencies. So we have move-on vouchers that agencies can apply for on behalf of their clients to move on from permanent supportive housing to a Section 8 voucher. We have vouchers exclusively for families. And new this year, we have 100 COVID-19 vouchers for anyone impacted by COVID in any sense. Those are all allocated currently, but we always advertise those programs and openings on our website. We don't work directly with people experiencing homelessness. We work with the partners and they make the referrals to us for this program. And then finally, you'll see the logo at the top for HomeLink. This is our coordinated housing system. And it's basically a community-wide process to connect people to permanent housing. And right now we're working closely with a few of our partners, the city, Bexar County, the Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul, SAM Ministries, on how we can ensure we have a common eligibility screening for prevention services so people don't struggle to navigate the system next year when they're needing prevention resources. So that's something we've been working on for the past several months. And we also, through a grant with USAA, have flexible funding available. So if you're certified as a HomeLink assessor and conducting this assessment, you have access to these flexible funds. And when people are seeking shelter, it's through a problem-solving conversation. If you can identify a safe housing solution, that funding is available to our assessors. So that's just a little bit about what we do at SARA that connects. I'll share our Contact Sarah email if you have any questions about any of these programs or how you can get involved. Thank you so much, and we can go to the next speaker.
Thank you. And next we have Patrick Steck, Interim Assistant Director from the city's Department of Human Services.
Thanks, Madeline. Yeah, I just want to touch on a few different programs that the Department of Human Services runs that are relevant to this conversation. And first is a financial counseling and benefits navigation program. So I think next is Sarah with NHSD. She'll talk about the assistance programs that I'm sure many of you folks are familiar with. But those are part of an umbrella of what we call the Financial Housing and Recovery Center, the FHRC. And it's an initiative of the city, multiple departments at the city with DHS and NHSD to respond to COVID, to help households who are in crisis. So the rental assistance program that's been going for many months gets a lot of press and popularity. But I also want to direct folks to the financial counseling and the benefits navigation program that DHS runs. So if you have a household that maybe you don't know where they need to go, they're looking for some sort of resources, these counselors are available to do one-on-one conversations, sort of in-depth, helping folks navigate benefits that might be available to them, talking about their household budget and how they can maybe move things around or adjust things, prioritize, because when a family is in crisis, you know that's sometimes hard to think through, especially in this pandemic that we're living through. So that can be accessed through 311, or I can actually drop the link into the chat box here to some more information about that service. The second is the Homeless Connections Hotline. So our homeless division of DHS started this in April in response to the pandemic as a way to direct folks to available services in the homeless system. And so we've been able to respond throughout the pandemic and adjust what we're able to offer. Katie just talked about the flex funds through the diversion program. That can be accessed through the homeless hotline. The phone number is 210-207-1799. I'll drop that in the chat. And that's available Monday through Friday. So this is really targeting the folks that are experiencing homelessness right now or at a very imminent risk of experiencing homelessness. So the Flex Diversion Funds is one of the things offered there, as well as helping navigate as a first entrance to the homeless system. And then just briefly, I want to talk about emergency shelter and rapid rehousing programs. The city also received CARES Act funds, just like Sarah and Katie talked about. Sarah managed the competition for some of those funds. So the city received about $16.9 million for the next 2 years. We've dedicated some of that to the hotel facility that Haven for Hope has been operating since April. And I see some Haven folks are on the call. I want to commend the Haven for Hope for the work they've done in responding to the pandemic to keep clients safe there at the emergency shelter services that they offer. A large chunk of funds are also going to expand rapid rehousing. So Sam Ministries, Salvation Army, and Haven for Hope are our grant recipients for those programs. Through the SA HomeLink system, clients can be navigated into these rapid rehousing services. These are for high-risk folks who are experiencing homelessness. There's an assessment for accessing those services, but we are grateful and fortunate to be able to expand through our great partners that effort. And then finally, DHS is expanding street outreach on homelessness. So throughout the pandemic, we're hearing a lot that unsheltered homelessness on the street is becoming a lot more visible. Probably a lot more folks, for a variety of reasons, are on the streets. And so we're hiring one outreach worker for each of the 10 city council districts, plus an additional for downtown, to really greatly expand street outreach and coordinating that with our partners, including Sam Ministries, Centro, and many others who are doing the work and who we're partnering with to connect folks who are on the streets to housing services, to get them what they need so that they can become stabilized quickly as possible. But we know that that can take time depending on an individual's circumstance. So we're hiring now for that, and they will be city staff working out in the council districts here just in the next few months. If you see an encampment or working with someone on the street who's homeless on the street and you don't know where to turn, 311 can direct you into the city's services. We also have an email address, which is homelessoutreach@sanantonio.gov that we check and can help respond to folks through that method as well. So those are just a few programs that we run, and glad to take questions at the end about any follow-up. And I'll hand it now to Sarah. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. As Patrick mentioned, our next presenter is Sarah Walmsley, Housing Administrator with the city's Neighborhood and Housing Services Department.
Thanks, Patrick and Madeline. And I am going to share my screen. My goal for 2020, one of them is to just know how to share my screen on all of the different virtual meeting applications. Hopefully I can check GoToMeeting off the list now. Everybody good? Cool. All right, so some of the content I'm going to share is a little bit probably review for a lot of folks on this call. So I'm going to go through it a little bit quickly, but here's what we've got today. So I wanted to talk first and foremost about the CDC moratorium. I know y'all are familiar with that and know that in order to qualify for protection, tenants have to give their landlord a signed declaration to qualify. So we did receive a lot of questions about, where can we access a declaration template? What are some good resources about it? So we've posted some information on our website, which you see here in green, where you can access declaration templates in 7 different languages, FAQs in 7 different languages. Rich is asking me to zoom out some. Let me see if I can do that. From beginning. I don't know if I can, Rich, I'm sorry. But I do see the edges are a little bit cut off. So back to the slides here, you can get declaration templates and questions and flyers in all the languages you see here, as well as some Know Your Rights videos that our friends at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid created for us. I wanted to also give them a quick shout out because tomorrow they are doing another Know Your Rights training for folks who have questions about evictions and the CDC order. This is a great resource that for folks who have evictions potentially pending in the new year, maybe those that were reset after they gave their judge the CDC Moratorium Declaration. So this is a good resource, and they do 2 presentations, one in English at 6 and one in Spanish, which will be at 7 p.m. So a few more resources to know about. Our Emergency Housing Assistance Program that's been referenced a couple times is our big one right now. It's rent, mortgage, and utility assistance, which includes internet for any household that's in San Antonio at or below 80% AMI. I will note right now, to qualify for rent or mortgage assistance, you actually have to be below 50% AMI. For folks above it, you get a cash grant. So to apply for those programs, you can go to this web-based link here or call by phone. The number is 210-207-5910. And for folks who can't access online applications, we do have in-person intake at the Financial Housing and Recovery Centers that Patrick mentioned. You just have to set an appointment to go to those. So here is some of those criteria I was talking about. At least for right now, you can get rent or mortgage, SAWS, CPS, internet, and a cash grant if you are below 50% AMI. For households above that, up to 80% AMI, there is an availability for cash grant. So if you're not sure what your household's income is, it's always a good idea to let them apply and encourage them to do so, and see if we can get them something. And I will note too that our program does differ a little bit for folks who have a filed eviction against them in court. We can help with a greater amount of assistance, thanks mostly to a new state program called the Texas Eviction Diversion Program. This is our team that administers it. We're all very proud of the work that they're doing in the courts and using great filing data from the county. But through this program, folks can get up to 6 months of rent assistance, 5 of which can be arrears or back rent. They need to be households with incomes at or below 200% of the federal poverty limit. And you'll notice that there's not referral information here, and that's specifically because our referrals have to come through the court process. So it's not something that a client can self-nominate to, as you would say. However, I will add that if you have questions about this program, or you have a client who's got an eviction filed against them, they can call the Fair Housing Hotline that you see here, 207-5910, to get connected to the team and talk through kind of what their options would be. Lastly, I want to talk really quickly about our Right to Counsel pilot program. This is legal aid for households at or below 100% AMI, and it's a good resource for tenants who might have questions about the CDC moratorium or a pending eviction that they do have. There are 2 online applications, one in English, one in Spanish. They can also access the program by phone at the number you see or via email. our courts team has leaned on our right to counsel attorneys quite heavily to kind of understand the court's process. I will add that too. I see a question from Mia. Will TEDP, that's the Texas Eviction Diversion Programs, provide more funds than the initial $600,000 to Bexar County? The answer to that is yes. We are going to get further assistance from the state. I think tentatively in the amount of about $3.6 million, and about 10% of that is earmarked for TEDP. We should know more about when that money will roll out soon. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next presenter is Tyler Smith, Vice President of Wells Fargo's Public Affairs.
Great, thank you. I don't have a presentation for everyone today, but I did just post some information in the chat box, the link for mortgage assistance and our phone number. Obviously, as one of the largest mortgage servicers in the country, our primary focus in this space is and has been on avoiding foreclosure, helping home buyers with modifications and forbearances, excuse me. Although we do have a expanding focus here, we just donated $5.4 million to 15 legal assistance organizations across the country. That includes the Texas Rio Grande Legal Services Group. So we are starting to get involved more on the rental side. I think most of what I'm going to present today or talk about today has to do with mortgages, however. We did receive some good news at the end of last week when the FHFA announced an extended foreclosure moratorium until January 31st of next year. So that means no foreclosures on Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac mortgages and no evictions on their REO properties. So the foreclosure rules that we follow and servicers follow are typically driven by investors and by insurers. So Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA, they're the ones that kind of come up with these rules. And so now we've seen the first domino fall here. We've seen the first moratorium get extended well into next year. So hopefully the others will follow suit. I guess the big thing that I would stress from Wells Fargo's perspective, for borrowers that are in trouble, you've got to get a hold of us. You got to talk to us. Or I understand some borrowers just don't want to do that if they're intimidated. Please, encourage them to talk to a HUD certified housing counseling agency. We've got very good options now, right? The CARES Act provided for some very, very good options, primarily forbearance. So there's still, unfortunately, some myths out there about forbearance. So I'll touch on those a little bit. The payment suspension, how does that work? Really, it's done in 3-month increments. So you contact us, and I provided the link, provided a phone number, and anybody that logs into their Wells Fargo account, you're going to see a banner all over the screen. If you need help, click here, and it is very intuitive. For mortgage, you just let us know you need assistance for 3 months. That's automatic, and then it renews for in 3-month increments. Kind of the big turning point is at 6 months, where we're at for a lot of mortgage holders right now. At the 6-month period, they have to contact us. They have to engage with us to extend that forbearance for the additional 6 months that the CARES Act allows. We want to make sure that they are still in need of that. They may have to provide some financial information to secure the rights that are allotted under the CARES Act. But that's, I think, a big part of our challenge right now is making sure borrowers are engaging. Yes, you've got forbearance, but it doesn't just automatically renew. So you need to contact us at that 3-month increment. I think the other biggest myth is, what happens when that forbearance period or when that payment suspension ends? Is there a big lump sum payment due? And that's typically just not the case. We do have repayment plans available. We'll divide that amount that's due from the missed payments and stretch that out into a manageable amount, a manageable payment amount, and spread it over time. There's payment deferral options, which basically just puts it as a lump sum, but at the very end of the loan. For FHA, they can turn that amount that's overdue into, it's kind of like a silent second mortgage. So there's no payment on it, there's no interest accruing on it, and it really just becomes due when that loan is paid off. So when either the borrower sells the house, or when they pay off the mortgage, or if they go to refinance, that's when that amount would be due. And then there's, of course, the loan modification, which everyone's familiar with. That's generally for borrowers who are experiencing a little bit longer term financial hardships. I do, somebody had mentioned earlier, you know, there's, I know, a great fear of a wave of foreclosures, and these are my personal thoughts given my history with the foreclosure group here at Wells Fargo. But I'm personally far more concerned with renters than I am with mortgage holders. And there's a number of reasons. First, of course, the CARES Act and the options available to home buyers. Yes, they're kicking that can down the road, but that's a very long road. As I mentioned, we could stretch payments out. Certainly want to do all we can to keep borrowers in the house. Don't have those same great options available for renters. The other thing that gives me I wouldn't say hope necessarily, maybe cautiously optimistic about avoiding a foreclosure wave is home values, right? The one key difference between now and the other foreclosure or the previous foreclosure crisis is that home values have really maintained or continued to rise, right? Prior to March, prior to COVID, foreclosures were at historical lows, and that was driven primarily by home values. So values, median home values, sales price, days on market, the Case-Shiller home price index, all of those things were remaining flat or steadily increasing. So borrowers today still have an option to avoid foreclosure, even if there's no modification available, if there's no options. I don't know that they'll have to go through foreclosure because they should still have enough equity in that home that they could go through a sale. Now, that's good news and bad news. Good news, they avoid a foreclosure, that, you know, avoid the damage that does to the credit. We avoid the impact that has on home values and on neighborhood stabilization efforts. But that borrower still has to find another place to live. One resource that I would point to for both rental and for mortgage is the CFPB website. They've got a wonderful site up for COVID-related impacts. It's just consumerfinance.org. I'll paste that into the chat as well, and I can hand it on to the next speaker.
Thank you so much. And just as a reminder, we do have about 30 minutes left and several more presenters to go. Our next presenter is Mark Ross, the president of Bob Ross Realty.
Can you make me the presenter so I can share the screen?
Of course.
Okay. Let me get backward. Okay, so one thing I'd like to talk with is to say thank you to both the City of San Antonio, Bexar County, all the housing agencies, and all of the staffs who have been working with the people to try to solve this problem. Oh, let me get back on the. So, as I said when I introduced myself, we've been working on this problem back since probably early March and helping the city craft their program for the renters mitigation as well as Bexar County. Some fundamentals of the rental housing industries is, you know, we have no desire to evict renters. That's our bread and butter. It costs us somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500 every unit we have to turn. We also have to go through, you know, a bunch of fees, court fees, lawyer fees. So, you know, I start with the premise that we would like to keep everybody in place where possible. Some things that I want to stress to everybody is, you know, just like Tyler said, communication is probably the biggest thing, not to ignore notices. When we need necessary documentation, tell the renter to get that, and also to explain their story as to why they're not able to pay. We are members, and I'm not speaking now directly on behalf of the association, I'm just giving you some of my perspective, but the property management industry has, waived probably millions and millions of dollars of rent and late fees, at their own doing. Anywhere, my company has, we own 700 rental units, and we've probably written off, given away, or discounted probably upwards of $200,000 so far into this cycle. We've been working with every resident that's communicating us, to work out some kind of payment plan and directing them, as well as filling out most of the papers for the city assistance funds. Some things I'd like to talk about is that as you have an opportunity, pretty much the discussion has been one-sided so far about eviction moratoriums and things like that. But at this point, as Congress is starting to put their package together, it's as important for them to come up with funds to help people through this process. Because what every program, whether it's the CARES Act or the diversion program, the resident who is in place still owes that rent. And at some point, as Tyler said, like with foreclosures, that ding on their credit report of a rental, debt could cost them, for the next 5 to 7 years, more increased rental payments, more deposits, the inability to live where they want to live because of the fact that all those things are examined when, you're looking at, is the resident creditworthy? And so I want to just, and I'm not advocating this, I'm just laying it out because I think it needs to be thought about. And that's, short-term gain versus long-term pain, and looking at situations holistically and in total. And when our residents hear the message that, there's an eviction moratorium, all they have to do is file the CDC. They fail to hear the part in point 2 that the rent's still due and they're still going to owe those balances. And so I would like to suggest another strategy, and I've been talking to my peers, and most of us are doing this, is we have come to the conclusion that, we don't want to ding people. And so when we get somebody who is totally, they may have gone through and got their 3 months assistance from the city and they're still unemployed, we're basically, and most people are, making deals to say, okay, we will forgive everything you owe us if you just return the apartment or unit to us, and we will leave you, with a good reference where it doesn't get reported to the credit, where it doesn't, ruin their chances going forward. And we've had some success with that. And I'm not saying that works for everybody, but when faced with, having a $10,000, hit on your credit report, which lowers your credit score, which means that, everything you pay for in the future, your cars, everything goes up. Somewhere in the process that needs to be kind of thought about as you go through this. And the other thing that I would just say is that, the eviction diversion program by the state so far, at least what I would tell you, is not working because of some of the language that's in the diversion program. And so a suggestion might be is to go back and bring back a group to assist the court in coming up with possibly a different kind of program, more like the city has or the county has, to really help people. And I think that is one thing, that we're working on right now because to have all this money available where the landlords won't accept it because of the terms that are contained within it is not good. And so as you deal with that and talk to people, you know, my one suggestion is just to make sure you're looking at their situation in total and having a discussion with them about, you know, what I call short-term gain versus long-term pain, and to really look at, you know, what is best for them going forward, not only immediately, but also in the long term. And I'd be happy to answer questions at the end of the program.
Thank you, Mark. And our next presenter, Brandy Pettis, Chief Operating Officer at the San Antonio Housing Authority.
So good afternoon. I'm going to present my screen as well. And I'm not sure if y'all could see that. But it is the risk mitigation or eviction mitigation and resources that SAHA has been doing during this time. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, we oversee two large programs for the Housing Authority. So public housing, where we do have a lot more flexibility than in the Housing Choice Voucher, because in public housing, we are the landlord. So right when COVID hit our city, we made, as an organization, made several commitments to our public housing families prior to any of the CARES Act funding, whether and even the CDC. So we immediately suspended eviction/terminations for our organization because we wanted to make sure our families still stayed housed during this time. We offered repayment agreements, and this wasn't something new to our organization. We have been doing repayment agreements for our public housing clients for years now. And so we just wanted to remind our families that that was still an option. I think I want to just kind of reiterate what both Tyler and Mark said was it's about the communication from our families during this time. We also partnered with the city of San Antonio when it came to their funds. We contributed a large or lump sum to them to ensure that they were able to help some of the SAHA residents, because on the Housing Choice Voucher side, we are not the landlords and we could not intervene when it came to the non-payment of rent of the client's portion to their landlord. What we could intervene in is if there was a change of income, we try to communicate with our families that that was an opportunity to reduce their rent. And then we also recognize it wasn't just rent for a lot of our families. They were still needing some type of other assistance. And so with partnership with the food bank and my Department of Community Development Initiatives, we still have reoccurring food distributions. And so we wanted to make sure our families had that opportunity. And the food distributions, again, were really for the public housing families, not necessarily for our Housing Choice Voucher families, but we did have one initiative where the food bank was able to assist some of our Section 8 clients directly. The way we communicated through our Housing Choice Voucher residents is that we sent out email blasts to our landlords asking them, to try to work with the families. But we recognize with many of them, they are either in multifamily or single family, and they're, especially in our single family, their portion of mortgages still had to be paid. But we wanted to reassure them during this time that SAHA was still making our housing assistance payments, and so that they would still receive those, because we hadn't had any indication that our fundings would be cut. We did receive some CARES Act funding for the agency, but not necessarily that impacted the housing assistance payments. And we knew our costs would actually be going up as families started submitting changes of income and decreases because they lost their employment. Again, we suspended our terminations. We really wanted to try to ensure that our families stayed housed, but we also knew that that would impact our landlords. And so we were doing anything and everything trying to communicate and just reminding them that the payments that SAHA was making on behalf of the clients were going to continue to happen. And lastly, we started conducting virtual inspections. And so during this time, though it has been minimized over than what we had originally projected for 2020, is that we were still issuing vouchers on the streets. As Katie mentioned, we actually allocated 100 new vouchers to Sarah for COVID-related activities. And so many of our landlords are saying, how are you going to inspect these units, our residents? And so we implemented virtual inspections because we not only wanted to keep our families housed during this time, but we wanted to have the opportunity to house new families during this time. Some of the referral programs, again, we partnered with Sarah on the COVID-related vouchers. We also have the move-on preferences, so to help free up some of the permanent supportive housing vouchers that were already within the city. All of that has to be coordinated through Sarah and the partnering agency. And then, of course, they still do have to meet SAHA's, or not necessarily SAHA's, but HUD's eligibility to be eligible for the housing choice voucher. So it looks like we have 9 out of the 100 still available, but those are still probably in that they're just not leased up, and so we probably have vouchers on the streets for those families. And then you know, again, agency resources are key during this time. We constantly are updating our social media campaigns, our websites, our phone staff actually have resource listings that we are trying to, if they can't receive assistance through the Housing Authority, but that they are trying to reach out to other organizations so they can get assistance. We actually have a dedicated web page that provides information to not just our families, but any families that are searching the website for information, because at this time we know that our wait lists are growing every day because of the need of affordable housing. Our housing choice voucher wait list continues to be closed. We were originally projecting that it would be open in 2020, but because we suspended all terminations, we've had a slight delay, and so that wait list has decreased over this time because we still have been calling individuals. We just haven't been able to open it, but we do have all of our public housing wait list open. And last, just other resources that we've been utilizing. Obviously, the city has been a great partner in putting information out there. HUD has information out there in their toolkit, and as well as Sarah on the eviction process as well. So that's what SAHA has been trying to do throughout this time. We've done a lot more, just like with other organizations, but I will answer any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next presenter is Tammy Trevino, the Executive Director. Oh, I'm sorry. Our next presenter is Tammy Trevino, the Executive Director from the Housing Authority of Bexar County.
Thank you, Madeline. Can you hear me? Okay, great. All right. So much like SAHA, the Housing Authority of Bexar County had 2 main programs. That's our Housing Choice Voucher Program, our Section 8, and we are landlords ourselves and do provide a lot of the same resources as Brandy mentioned under the SAHA program. The additional program that we ran during the past 7 months was the TRAM program, which was the Rental Assistance Program on behalf of the county. That program has now ended. We had a December 7th deadline, which is today. And so that program, we did end up meeting the goal of the $4 million that needed to be spent, and actually went over a little bit. And so we're waiting on that additional funds so that we can complete the program. But let me just go back to the Section 8 program. So under Section 8, we began, one of the important things I think that we did for eviction prevention was much like SAHA, we did the virtual inspections, and that was important for us. We did get to open the wait list in September. We got over 7,000 applications, and we've already gone through about the first 500 on that list. We're looking for those people who have who are disabled and who are elderly, and those are the people that we will meet first. We're also working with the homeless. So those are all part of our preferred status waitlist applicants, and so we go through those first, and those are the first ones that will be met under the voucher program. But looking into the future, because we weren't sure how long this was going to last, we're also in the first part of 2021, backing up, I'm sorry. We went totally electronic. And so one of the big things that we did is we invested into a big database system where we sent off all our files. They've all now been imaged and are part of a database management system. And so we can access our files online so that our caseworkers can continue to telework and stay safe. So that's been a big part for us. It's been a learning curve for everyone, including our clients. So what we've done with our direct services to our tenants is we're creating a virtual website as well. There'll be an applicant portal, a tenant portal, and then we're going to do recertification. So when they apply, they can apply online. When they have to have briefings, we do everything online. And when they have to do a recertification on an annual basis, all of that is also done online through a secure website. So all of that is new for us. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for folks to submit their documentation so that so we can try to avoid them getting into trouble with their landlords. And again, because we're not the landlord under the Section 8 program, we really can't intervene with the landlord and how he enforces his lease, but we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the applicant to stay out of trouble in terms of documentation. In the areas where we are the landlord, we did a lot of the same things that Saha did. We suspended our fees. We've entered into repayment agreements with those that could not pay. And we suspended evictions when it wasn't about crime related, when it wasn't crime related. So if it was about payments, those evictions were suspended as well. If we did have some issues, as most everyone did, with tenancy issues that had to do with crime, and we did have to enforce those at times. So other than that, we basically went through the suspension, and we're going to continue that. We're going to continue doing that until we're past this pandemic. The other thing that I will mention is that we still have vouchers open under Mainstream, and that's for families, individuals that are disabled between the ages of 18 and 61. And so if you don't have to be the head of the household in order to qualify, the Mainstream vouchers can come in through a referral. And this is where I will reach out to you agencies who work with disabled populations. If you want to be a member agency on our referral system, we will take your applicants if we can get you to sign a memorandum of agreement with us. And so if you have a client who is, if you have a client who is disabled and needs housing, we can bump them to the front of the wait list line if they come in through a referral of one of our partners that we currently have a memorandum of agreement with. So if you're an agency who currently works with that population, we would love to talk to you about an agreement. We have about 78 Mainstream vouchers and applying for additional ones right now. And so our goal is to hit at least 100 by next year. And so we'd like to really get as efficient as possible in meeting that population. So that's all I have. Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you, Tammy. Our next presenter is Laura Montañez on behalf of Robert Reyna, the Community Development Manager at Bexar County.
Yes, thank you. And so what I wanted to echo off of Tammy's presentation is that while the TRAN program has now been completed, we are following through with a new initiative, which will also be to prevent evictions from occurring. This is a partnership that we will be joining with the City of San Antonio. We're still ironing out the details, but these are funds that are coming in from the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs, or TDHCA. We have approximately about $717,000 that will be awarded for this program, and it'll be the TRAP, or Texas Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And for that program, we are looking for Bexar County residents that are at 80% AMI or below. The funds may be used for up to 6 months of rental assistance, including 5 months of arrears and 1 month of current rent or forward rent. And then from there, the rental payments will be made directly to the landlord. And this is an initiative in response to COVID, as we understand the importance of safe and decent affordable housing and to prevent any displacement from occurring just in response to the COVID pandemic. And so, as I mentioned, the ironing of the details is still underway. However, as soon as we do have those details finalized, the application and additional criteria, we will definitely share that out on a public forum so that we can continue to spread the word on that program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. As a reminder, we have 7 minutes and 2 more presenters. Our next presenter is Annie Erickson, Senior Director at Endeavors.
I don't think Annie joined. So we might move to them next because she still apparently had difficulty with the internet.
Oh, okay, good to know.
No, I think she's on. She's on. Annie, are you on? Okay, we can go to the next presenter.
All right, our next presenter is Raymond Herrera, Local Contact Agent from the Alamo Area Council of Governments. Hey, Raymond, I see that you're off of mute, but I'm not sure if we're able to hear you right now.
Can they unmute themselves, Madeline? Maybe that's the issue.
Yes, they are. There might be audio issues, but he's unmuted. Okay. So I'll just read off what Raymond included in the chat. So if you would like to be a referral source to Bexar County and or the Alamo counties, please email me, and his email is in the chat box. Well, thank you, Raymond.
Thank you very much, Raymond, and apologize everyone that I think Annie as well is not being able because of the internet thing. So just a quick reminder, we're about time, but we got a few questions. Some of them are easy to answer, but we got a very interesting question from Tino Gallegos about a resource or a flow chart with all resources. We're going to get through all the questions, but we don't want to go over time because we appreciate all your time at this critical end of the year, and we'll get all the questions in order and we'll send them all. There was also a question about whether you'll be able to access the presentations. We have asked the presenters to send us the presentation and we will compile in one document along with the resource document that we are receiving from all our speakers. We'll send this all to everyone on the list. And feel free to share and to send to your network as well. I leave it now for Katie Villa, our Executive Director at SARA, for the closing remarks. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you everyone for joining today and for your interest and passion in meeting the needs of our community going into next year. I thought this was really helpful, and I see in the chat that Leela shared some future roundtable topics based on the information today and also on the questions you had. So be sure to take a look at that. We'll follow up with everyone to keep this group engaged, and now you have some resources, some referral partners. We're all in this together, and so you can use this network created today to help you in your work going into next year. So thank you so much, and if you have follow-up questions for us at SARA, please email us or contact us through our website. We appreciate your time.